What's good, folks? It's Nightmare Frame here with a new Warframe video, coming at you with one useful tip for every Warframe. Currently, I'll be going in alphabetical order, giving you some useful information that you probably never knew about. Those actually two that I recently found out about. That's LAVOS and GRENDEL, because I don't really play those Warframes. Anyway, hopefully this will help you out. Ashe's Blade Storm is a finisher damaging ability, but it doesn't scale off traditional means. It is not affected by finishing touch or covert lethality. The weapon type won't even be taken into consideration, just the mods and combo counter. You want to mod the weapon for damage, attack speed, elements, and faction damage, and boost its base damage even further with Arcane Fury. And the only weapon currently to reach 13 times combo is the Venka Prime, so it is the best rivenless weapon option for a Blade Storm Ashe. Atlas can build up his rubble stacks pretty easily by summoning and killing off his rumblers. It does require a lot of spamming, but you can use this in between or in the beginning of a fight for a nice build up in rubble for that extra buff, especially if you're using Rubble Heap Augment. Banshee's silence stuns enemies for 2 seconds and cannot be recasted or refreshed unless you move away from the enemies and back into their range. This is why you never want to build a lot of range when using Banshee's silence. The most, and I mean the most, that you can have with silence is base range. Don't go any more than that. This way you can manipulate the stun more effectively. And when using slow effects like Gloom, you can slow that stun animation, giving you a more potent crowd control. BARUUK's best DPS output comes from his SARYN Storm. It has its own combo counter, and you can build that up to increase your damage. Alongside that, you can have a melee weapon, any melee weapon that isn't a combo pausing melee, and just equip the 3 gladiator mods and build up combo on SARYN Storm and benefit from the gladiator set bonus, just so you can get those juicy red crits. So there is no need to snapshot gladiator stacks from the equipped melee to have red crits on BARUUK's 4, and have a primary and secondary equipped with the Dexterity Arcanes. CHROMA's Fury buff from Vex armor is an additive damage bonus increase to all your weapons' base damage and functions the same as Serration, Hornet Strike, etc. So there won't be a need to use those mods as long as you can maintain your buff. And to easily stack your buff, you can use the HEMA, modded for fire rate, holster speed, and tactical reload, for the weapon to reload while it's holstered. And the HEMA uses your health as a resource, so this will damage CHROMA and help build up his Fury buff. EMBER's passive grants you 5% power strength for every enemy that is inflicted with the heat status effect and caps at 100%. So you can use weapons to easily spread that heat and use your 4th to add on to that heat and continuously give you power strength increase. I like to use EMBER with the Kuva Ogress equipped with the Night Watch Napalm mod to have lingering pockets of fire. EQUINOX has a passive called Day and Night, and switching between the two grants you different abilities and buffs. The first ability that has you switch between the two gives you some nice bonuses. In day form, you receive an additive gun damage multiplier that applies to your weapon's base damage. Just guns, not melees. While the speed buff is a multiplicative increase to all other forms of speed buffs. Excalibur's third ability, Radial Javelin, is a mediocre ability, but with its augment, Furious Javelin grants him a damage multiplier to his melee that functions as a multiplicative damage increase to all other forms of damage, depending on the amount of enemies you've hit with the ability. Frost's Ice Globe deals true damage on collision, so enemies that collide with the Ice Globe and get knocked back into an obstacle take true damage. And you can of course multiply this even further by having them procced with Viral to multiply all that damage that they take to their health. And you can maximize this and have it more consistent by grouping them up and casting Globe above their heads and easily nuke high level enemies. This only works on enemies that can be knocked back, so not the Kuva Guardians or any bosses. GARA's third ability is great for crowd controlling and energy management with the augment, but it also serves another purpose. When the mirrors shatter, 50% of the mirror's damage is accumulated into her second ability damage calculation. This is also in addition to you shattering her 4th ability. Garuda's passive gains a damage buff when she loses health. This damage buff is a separate damage multiplier calculated independent from other sources of damage, so pairs well with faction multipliers, viral, headshot multipliers, and in Eidolon Hunts, this works as a free primed chamber. Gauss's Thermal Sunder is quite underestimated. It helps charge your red line and is able to fully strip enemy armor with a maxed out red line when you combine its two forms. Casting heat, then cold will deal blast damage and trigger a reaction that pulls enemies towards you. But guess what? You don't have to cast the heat version. You can apply the heat status effect with the weapon and cast cold to pull in enemies to finish them off, and also strip their armor. Grendel's second ability is known to heal Grendel and among other things, but did you know it also gives you a buff called Nourished Strike, which gives you a toxin elemental damage multiplier to all your weapons. This elemental damage works like an elemental mod, stacking additively with similar mods and combining with other modded elements, basically giving you a free elemental mod slot. HARROW's healing and Covenant coverage scales off affinity radius rather than range, so if you want your teammates to get healed up and get Covenant, make sure they are within 50 meters of you, and you can increase that affinity radius even further by using the Vazarin Focus School or deploying Phosphor Fireworks, which you can buy from NEKROS. HYLDRYN is the frame that is all about shields, from her ability resource and survivability, and this leaves her vulnerable to toxin damage. Remember, the status effect and damage types are two different things, so there's a way to have her survive toxin damage. If you have overshields, they protect HYLDRYN's health pool from damage types that bypass her shields and deal damage directly to the health. Toxin damage, which is the prime example. So if you just have overshields, you can survive toxin damage. You can do this by using both her Pillage and Subsume Condemn from HARROW. HYDROID's passive has a 50% chance to summon tentacles that deal true damage whenever you do a melee slam attack, and you can combine this with a Temporeal Stance using the block combo with a Dokram Zaw equipped with Exodia Hunt, gathering and pulling in enemies while also crowd controlling them without using abilities. INAROS is the only Warframe in the game to have 4 useless abilities. IVARA's second ability, Navigator, allows you to control projectiles, and the distance travel will increase the projectile's damage. You don't always have to have the ability active. You can throw your projectile and immediately press the second ability to control it halfway through. KHORA's Strangledome is a great tool to crowd control enemies, and if they're caught within Strangledome, they take 200% more damage from weapons and abilities, but not from her own Whipclaw. And the Strangledome works like a radiation proc, and enemies outside of the Strangledome will fire at their allies who are caught in it. LAVOS's Vile Rush has you travel forward and leave a trail that does cold damage and cold procs left behind. Usually, you have to travel for 0.5 seconds to end it early, but you can use the jump key to cancel the animation to leave a pool of cold residue within a small area to prime enemies and prepare for your nuke. Limbo's Rift Torrent Augment grants you an additive weapon-based damage increase with each enemy affected by Rift Surge. So if you combine this with something like Breed Surge, you can safely stay within your Cataclysm and damage enemies outside who aren't affected by Rift Surge. LOKI can switch teleport and steal a Dargon from the enemy. It's just something fun to do in the plains. Mag's Magnetize is a DPS and tanking ability. Casting it on an enemy will create a bubble that pulls in enemies towards the center and redirect all projectiles shot in and from outside the bubble to the center. It will absorb the damage and have it multiplied. This bubble will also protect you from enemy fire, meaning if you stand on the other side of the bubble, you will take no damage from gunfire. MESA's Shatter Shield is not a straight-up damage reduction ability, but it reduces incoming damage from bullets and projectiles. That's it. It deflects bullets and reduces their damage by 95%. So that means you will take a lot of damage from splash damage, melee, and damage over time status effects like bleeds and toxin. Mirage's Eclipse is a great weapon damage multiplier that is determined by your light surroundings and intensity. To guarantee the most out of your light surroundings, you need to enable and disable certain graphical settings. NEKROS' first ability is something that is overlooked and underestimated. It can one-shot any enemy when they're at 25% health, and when you kill them with your first, it turns them into a shadow, and you don't have to necessarily wait till they're 25% health. You can cast your one on an enemy and they'll be marked for harvest. Once they're marked, you can kill them with anything and they'll also turn into a shadow. Marked for harvest lasts for 3 seconds, and this way you can choose who you want for your shadows, and can be a better option than casting your 4th, since that slows you down and can get you killed. NEZHA can produce an additional chakram if thrown into a group of enemies that are impaled by his divine spears. This can help stack the debuff faster and stack up reaping chakram. NIDUS can highlight the trajectory path of your virulence and maggots when you hold down your first ability key. Nova's Molecular Prime is an amazing debuff that has enemies take 2 times more damage from all sources, and this can pair well with other multipliers. There is one downside, and that the multiplier isn't applied to shields. Nyx's Absorb converts a percentage of damage taken into an additive weapon damage bonus like SARYN that is applied after deactivating Absorb, and it is only for guns, not melees. Oberon's Smite is treated as a weapon projectile, so it can be buffed with Vigor Swap and Arcane Arachne. This setup is pretty simple. Use Uniru Magnetic Blast and deploy the Mutalisk Quanta's alternate fire. The bubble will be attracted to the enemy, and when you shoot Smite onto the magnetized enemy, it will pass through the bubble and bounce within it and won't seek other enemies. This was an old school Disruption Demolist nuke meme setup that still works, and nowadays you can apply Helminth. Octavia's Amp isn't only used to increase the range on her first, but it gives you a weapon base damage multiplier. This damage is an additive base damage increase that functions like SARYN, Hornet Strike, etc. And this buff is only present while you're on the Amp field and can be shared with allies and is complemented by damage multipliers like Roar, Sonar, and Eclipse. Protea's first ability, Grenade Fan, has 2 forms, and the one that grants you shield also gives you a 3-second shield gate passive when your shields break. This 3-second passive can be overridden if you use mods like Brief Respite and the Augur set, since they grant shields from energy usage. So you're getting 2 layers of shield regen, but the only one that is taken into effect are the Augur and Brief Respite mods, meaning you will get left with a lower shield gate. So basically, when you refresh your shields with these mods, you're refreshing the shield gate passive from your first, making you lose the 3 seconds. You're getting shields back while you're not supposed to. So if you use the Augur mods, you have to pick up the shield satellite grenades for you to get the 3-second passive. Revenant is the true immortal Warframe. His Mesmer skin prevents him from dying even from toxin damage, and if any damage type that goes through his health or any form of splash damage that is considered lethal will drop his health down to 2 but will not fully kill him as long as he has Mesmer skin active. RHINO's Roar is a universal damage multiplier on abilities, NPCs, and weapons. It works pretty much like a faction damage mod and is additive to any modded faction damage multipliers. So if you want your bleeds, heat, electric, and toxin procs to scale even better, then Roar is the most consistent and reliable buff for you rather than Eclipse. SARYN's Toxic Lash is one of the best abilities in game and is mostly used for guaranteed spore spread on any part of the body if they are affected by spores. Here is what makes it strong. It coats all your weapons with toxin damage. The toxin status effect is guaranteed on enemies regardless of your weapon's status chance. It won't combine with modded elements, so it is a separate instance of damage. It also triple dips in damage with faction mods equipped on your weapons, since it is calculated twice because it is not a modded element, and the damage of Toxic Clash will scale from your power strength and the modded toxin damage on your weapon. The toxin damage is doubled with melee. SEVAGOTH's Shadow can always start with 100% energy if you have the mod preparation equipped on it, since it counts as a separate warframe and it's first time loading into a mission, so you can always have full energy upon spawning it. Titania's first ability is a great ability to use and subsume onto frames that don't have Prime Surefooted, as it grants you status and CC immunity, and can be shared with your allies. Trinity's Energy Vampire is mostly used as support ability, but you can actually use it to nuke an entire room, since it deals percentage-based true damage, which is damage done directly to the health, ignoring all forms of defenses. You can multiply that with viral stacks and use an ability that will spread a percentage of that damage within the area. Example, Mark for Death. If you're building Valkyr for raw damage with Hysteria, you're better off running Steel Charge in the aura with Power Drift instead of Coaction Drift, as the Coaction Drift will give you a smaller multiplier than a 15% power strength increase. Vauban's Overdriver is an entire damage multiplier that is calculated after your total damage. Volt can be a great addition in a Prophet Taker fight because of his shields, giving you that crit damage and separate instance of electric damage that does not get combined with your modded elements. So there's no need to use the Shock Trooper augment, as that will combine with your other elements. Wisp modes can be granted to any allied faction, and even abilities such as Resonator, speeding it up and have the Resonator stun enemies with the shock mode, and the shock has a 100% chance to proc the electric status effect, giving you a free proc to boost condition overload on your melee and guns. Wukong's Cloudwalker isn't affected by any sprint speed mods or abilities, since he isn't sprinting, so the only way you can increase his movement speed is by using movement speed multipliers, and you can easily do this by subsuming Molt from SARYN, modding him with some power strength, and using the passive from Caressed Prime equipped with the Dispatch Overdrive mod. Zaku Zata's Whisper Void damage is a separate instance of damage similar to Toxic Lash and does not affect any of your modded elements, but it does get multiplied with faction mods, and the Void status effect can benefit quite a bit from projectile weapons. Ureli is the most f***ing useless Warframe in the entire game. Zephyr's tornadoes can adapt elemental and physical damage that you inflict to it and deal it to enemies, and it can distribute 100% of the total damage, critical hits, and status effects from your weapons to enemies, and the critical damage that is dealt to the enemies is multiplied by 200%. Alright, that has been it for me. I do have enjoyed this video, and if you did, feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe for more Warframe content, streams, and so much more. Do refer to the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, peace.